When we think about the word family, there's a lot that comes to mind. For some of us, it's a really happy topic. It reminds us of people we love and cherish and get to see daily. For others, it reminds us of a lot of pain and grief as we think about people we have lost. And for others, it's painful because they are people who maybe you think should be one way but aren't. So I recognize that this can be a very difficult topic as we go into it because we all have our own personal histories and cultures and stories surrounding the idea of family. So let's start by thinking about how society views family and how society thinks about family. On Google Images, here are the first 5 images that came up when I typed in photographs of families. So using critical literacy, we can see that there are some things that stand out. Society, by and large, appears to define family as being what's called a nuclear family, a man, a woman, and 2 children. And apparently the children have to hang off your backs like little kangaroos or something. So we also see that society, by and large, has a diverse view about what family can be racially. We see 3 pictures of Caucasian or white families, 1 biracial or black family, and 1 Asian family that come up. However, notice they all still have a very nuclear sense to them of a man, a woman, and 2 children. Additionally, the only photograph that has a multi-generational family is the Asian family, which is true historically to their culture, but just because it could be true, it doesn't mean it's always true that they include grandparents and multi-generations within their definition of family. But notice what's missing. We don't see any families with single parents, with more than or less than 2 children. We don't see any families that represent biracial unions. For example, notice that everyone is the same race that appears to be married or together or parenting together. We also don't see any clear representations of adoption. We may not know that for sure, but they physically look very similar to their parents, so phenotypically we can say that these look to be birth children. So there are a lot of different representations of family that are not represented in these 5 first images that come up on Google Images. So what do sociologists and anthropologists define a family as? The first widely recognized definition for family is a group who has a sense of home and group identity. So as you think about that definition and what it means, does this mean roommates or friends could be considered family because there's a group identity there? Or in college and post-college, there's a sense of home there if you live together? Does this include grandparents, aunts, cousins, even extended relatives if there's that group identity, even if you don't necessarily live together or in one place? Another common definition, cited by sociologists and anthropologists alike, are that families are interdependent groups. They can be based on blood connections, on legal bonds, or just on explicit commitments to one another. So as we break down that definition, does that mean adoptive parents count as family because those are legal bonds? Could it be blood relatives, or could we remove blood relatives? For example, if I were estranged from my father, is it possible that he would no longer be considered part of my family, even though there is a blood connection, because there's an explicit commitment that he is not? There are some really tough questions and some things to think about as you think about your family and the drawing that you made of your family. How did you decide who was included and who was excluded? What does your picture say about the way you define family? So let's think a little bit about the realities of what family looks like in America. So, first and foremost, the most popular kind of family that is visualized in media and especially in children's books is the nuclear family. So this is the American image of having opposite sex parents, a man and a woman, who are married for the first time, and within that marriage give birth to children. So in America, this definition of a nuclear family that currently have children under the age of 18 makes up 19% of homes. Are you surprised by that number? Did you kind of in your mind think, well, no, it has to be more than that because that's what we see in the media? Actually, there's much more examples of non-nuclear families in America right now. For example, blended families are becoming more and more the norm. So this could be parents who are married for the first time or additional times, but they bring additional children into the marriage with them, or they may not bring any other children into the marriage, but for example, pets. We're seeing more and more people are defining pets as part of the family as opposed to just children alone. Maybe some of you drew some pictures of animals in your family portrait. Another group that is definitely rising with the definition of family structure is the single-parent home. 28% of children in America have only one parent that lives with them. The other parent may be involved, there may be visitation rights, but by and large these are considered single-parent homes. This also includes parents where one parent is incarcerated and therefore is not living with them. We're seeing a rise in live-in family structures in which there are parents who are parenting together, but the parents are unmarried, they're choosing not to get married. We're also seeing a rise in same-sex family structures, especially given the recent Supreme Court ruling allowing same-sex marriage. And of the different family structures out there that are same-sex, only 16.4% actually have children, but I'm going to go ahead and predict that that number will rise given the most recent Supreme Court ruling. I love this one. I think it's just a funny name for it, but it's also a very sad reality for people that have graduated from college since 2006 and have experienced just this really slow economy where there aren't as many jobs. And these are boomerang families where adult children have moved back in with parents because there simply aren't the job opportunities that were promised post-high school and post-college. Another family structure is the commuter family. This has actually defined my family structure for most of my high school career, in which the parents live separately, maybe for a job, that was my case, I know, or for whatever reason where the parents they're still married, but they live in different areas and the children commute between the parents. Now, as you're looking at this list, you'll notice there's still some that are missing. These don't encompass every type of family structure that exists. For example, they don't talk about children living with grandparents. They don't talk about having multiple different people living within the same household. They don't talk about children who choose to be emancipated from their parents and live independently. So there are a lot of different family structures. One single list isn't going to capture the uniqueness and the diversity in what we experience in America. However, despite that diversity, there are still some very clear stereotypes, the most prevalent of which is represented in the media as the nuclear family that is considered the norm. Now, in general, if you just think of the most basic idea of a nuclear family, which is just two parents that are opposite sex living in one house with children, well, that would make up 63% of the population. So I could see where this is a very prevalent stereotype because it's over half of the people in America. However, this idea of the nuclear family, that still includes second marriages. It still includes unmarried parents within that statistic. It includes blended families where it's a second, third, fourth marriage, and multi-generational families. So within that 63% statistic, that's really misleading to say that over half of the families in America are nuclear. If you really take that narrow definition of first-time married parents with children under 18, again, we see that same statistic of 19%, a much smaller amount. That's probably the more accurate amount. So that is one stereotype that really pervades children's literature and the media. Another common stereotype you're going to see is that the man is the head of the house. Well, if a majority of homes we're looking at don't necessarily have that nuclear structure or have a prevalence of single parents, that's going to be a possibility. Additionally, even within the nuclear family, 40% of women are actually the primary breadwinners, meaning that they're making more money or generating more income than their husbands. So is that over 50%? Is it the majority? No, but it's definitely a very large chunk of the families that we see. So again, seeing the man as the head of the house is definitely a stereotype and a myth that pervades the media that is no longer quite as accurate. But that does feed into the third one you're going to see a lot of, which is gender roles. So when you think about how families are represented in the media, typically you have this image of Leave It to Beaver, where the father's going out and working and bringing in money, and the mother is in charge of the cooking, the cleaning, the laundry, whether or not she has another job as well. You're going to very often see in children's books, if you look through the illustrations, pictures of the dad sitting or watching sports while the mother is doing the housework, the cleaning. The mother is the one helping to solve problems for the child. So these gender roles are not an accurate representation of what's currently happening in American families. In fact, 63% of the primary women breadwinners. So of the 40% that are breadwinners, well over half of those are single mothers. So to represent gender roles appropriately, you're going to have to show some strong women in a lot of these books, which doesn't always happen. So let's think for a minute about different books that might better represent some of these more diverse family structures we see. Here are a few of my suggestions. First is Monday, Wednesday, and Every Other Weekend. This is the story of a boy and his dog as they go between a mother and a father's household, one of which is married, so it's a blended family, but however, the parents are separated or divorced. So this is a more accurate view of what students within your future classrooms may be experiencing. These two books I really quite like because one represents a single mother and the other one a single father, so we see single parent households. Please note though, I think it's interesting that it's much easier to find pictures or books that represent single parent households where the parents are minorities. For example, this is a story about a Latina, and this is a story about an African American. However, within the story about depicting the white child, the parents are just divorced, and you get to see that back and forth. However, here it's a single parent, and there's no other parent in the picture. So that's very interesting as well to note. I especially like this book, A Chair for My Mother, because as of October 18th, Pharrell Williams, a very famed author and illustrator for children's literature, has passed away. So this book has even more resonance and meaning to me right now. Another great book that I love is by Rose Lewis, and it's Every Year on Your Birthday, and it's the story of a girl who was adopted. So again, there are books that are starting to really rip open this idea of a stereotypical nuclear family. Jacqueline Woodson, one of my favorite authors by and large. Those of you who read Brown Girl Dreaming, this is the same author. This is a beautiful book with great portraits called Visiting Day. And throughout it, it's a little girl getting ready to go see her father, and she's very excited to go see him. And on the last page, you find out that he is incarcerated, so she's actually going to visit him in prison. With the largest incarceration rate of any first world nation, this is definitely a reality, especially within the urban core, but there are going to be families where there is an incarcerated parent. So having examples for those children is a really great tool to have in your classroom. My Fairy Stepmother and Dad and Pop, these are two books that are focusing on, again, not only this idea of parents being divorced, but also the idea of having step-parents, something else that is a growing reality in American culture. So these are some examples I was able to find of some diverse family structures within children's literature. For your application activity, you're asked to do the same. You're given a list of the different family structures in your imaginary classroom, and you're asked to create a library in which you are showing you can find these books that can act as mirrors for our students, but also windows for students that come from different family structures. So with that in mind, whenever you're finding books, there are some great resources to use. My favorite is the website Goodreads.com. I know I've talked about it before. On this website, you're able to look up books based on their themes and topics, authors, and illustrators, which I think is great. But also, you get great recommendations from people you can trust. Many of the people who are on Goodreads and have accounts that are making reviews about books are librarians, teachers, students, avid readers. So you're able to see what other people are thinking and saying about these books. Also, if you're choosing to do an internet source where you're looking for a book list with particular themes or topics, I strongly encourage you to look for book lists that come from reputable sources. So we're talking libraries or literary organizations. If you look at blogs, often this is just one person's opinion, and as we know, one person's opinion could be biased or flawed. However, if you're getting it from someone like a library or literary organization, you've had many eyes look over the list, checking for bias, and looking for high-quality materials. I encourage you to have a lot of fun as you dig through and try to find really quality books for your future students in this week's application activity.